Okay. So, hello, I'm Linda Conley. Today is January 23rd, 2014, and I'm here on Spring Street in Hopkinton, Mass. with Joe Martin, and we're going to do an interview with him. I'm going to interview him about his experiences and his life in the town of Hopkinton. This is all part of the oral history project that is connected to the Historical Commission. And we hope that this information will be valuable for today and into the future, that people will find some interesting historical information about the town in the past and the people who are living here now. So I'm going to hand it over to Joe.
Okay, Linda, I'm glad you could make it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by letting you know that I was born exactly in the house next door.
Wow.
In 1934. My mother and father came from, my father came from Cuba, rather Spain to Cuba, and then he met my mother, and then they came to this country. Now, this was one of the first places that they actually lived in, and it was a farmhouse. It was the Lyford property for the last several years, and it was, I don't know how many acres exactly, but I remember I didn't have any memories from actually living there, just what I was told occurred. And one of the things that occurred was when I was born, of course, that was during the Depression, and my father didn't have any money, and the doctor charged my father a bushel of potatoes for my delivery, and I hope I've lived up to that, the cost over the years. But anyhow, I grew up.
So did they grow potatoes? Do you know?
Oh yeah, my
Yeah.
father, and again, that's part of the story.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I don't recall really living on Spring Street. I do recall some events because my mother used to come back here to visit a couple of people that she knew. Now, my father had a tough time for many, many years, and again, I said it was during the Depression, and he did all kinds of things to try to feed the family and try to get jobs, and he did manage to eventually wind up getting a job in this. I think this was around 1940 or so, at a place in Westboro, Bay State of Brazos, and you never saw anybody so happy as he was when that happened. But again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I want to tell you that right across the street, and you've heard about the Spite House, or rather the two-colored house.
Yes, I have heard about that.
Okay, and that was almost directly across from this property here. And I can tell you that I am one of the few people that actually was in that house at one time. And when I say this is because my mother knew Mrs. Wheeler, who lived in that house. And as a little boy, and I was probably maybe 2 years old or whatever, she used to actually walk up Spring Street to see Mrs. Wheeler, and she'd bring me along. And I recall being in the house and seeing some of the things that they had in there. I don't have great memories from it.
Can you tell us, though? I know about the two-colored house, but people listening might not know. You know, what it looked like from the outside and what the deal was.
Well, I don't know the exact history because there were always different stories. And my sister Rose she did some research on it, and she, I guess...
Rose Lavelle.
Rose Lavelle.
Yeah.
And she put together some things, and it was always vague as to really what happened. I understand there was a dispute between a couple of the people that lived there, and they actually put a petition in the house to separate each other from I guess so that they wouldn't have too many arguments.
Yeah.
But the house was actually painted two different colors. And if I recall, and again, you know, some things are vague, but I think it was a yellow and red house. And I'm not sure. I wish that I wish that back then I would have paid more attention. But, you don't think of those things when you're a kid, And I know that my mother did visit Mrs. Wheeler several times. I don't know how many times I actually was there.
And she was one of the people that lived on one side of the house.
Yeah, well, she did live on one side. Now,
Right.
whether she was involved in the dispute, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it could have well been. I really don't know. I know that I recall playing in the front yard because there was a hill coming down, and I used to roll down the hill as a little boy. It's funny because I think about it. I was always kind of fond of those memories, but I never realized that I would be living across the street from
Yeah,
it
yeah,
years
funny
later.
to think, yeah.
But anyhow, to continue, I want to explain that some of the things that we saw here in Woodville, my first memories actually from Woodville were on Exchange Street, where my mother and father lived. They moved to Exchange Street, and I recall that my father said that if he had had $1,500, he could have bought all that property.
Wow.
Back then.
Wow.
And of course, being a depression, he didn't have anything. And again, we never realized that we'd be living right next door to where that was. But my father moved to Exchange Street, and by this time we had quite a few in the family. And my father always had gardens. He loved his gardens. But he did it for a couple of reasons. Number one was to feed the family. And when I say he had gardens, he had pretty good sized gardens.
Yeah.
We used to pick probably 60 bushels of potatoes, and we'd put them down in the cellar. My mother would can all kinds of stuff. And we had to work in the garden, which, as a kid, it was kind of tough because you wanted to play all the time. But my father was pretty strict about us going out and working in that garden. But we also knew that that's where our food came from. My father also had animals. Now, he had several chickens. He used to have an egg route, and he had this old truck that he used to load up with the eggs, and he'd drive all around to Framingham, and I don't know exactly where he went, but I know he had quite an egg route.
Right.
And what happened was, and I didn't realize that he actually had to stop because he wasn't getting paid by the customers because the depression. And so he finally stopped doing that. But he continued to raise chickens. He had goats, he had pigs, all that stuff, because they slaughtered the pigs. And
this is on Exchange Street.
this is on Exchange
Does that house still exist and the property still
the house was torn down because my sister built a house there, but the old house was torn down. But he had it was probably about 7 acres there.
Wow.
And he had, I don't know, everything that was usable, he would make into a garden. And I remember the first garden that my mother had was made by me because my father wouldn't do that. He wanted everything to raise his vegetables. And but my mother loved flowers, so I would take a spade or whatever it took to get a garden going so that she could raise her flowers. Like I said, he raised the chickens. He wound up, one of the reasons that I don't like chicken to this day is because I hated to go out and we'd kill those chickens. And that to me was, not a good memory. And but we had to do it.
Yeah.
And he actually rented. Years ago, there was the food freeze. Remember the food freeze up in? You live right near it.
Okay.
Right off Pleasant Street.
Yeah.
Pleasant in Maine. Mm-hmm. And my father could rent lockers there for $50 a year, so he could put his chickens in there after we
to store
Yeah,
the dead
right.
chickens, freeze
And
the chickens.
that kept us, even though I never cared that much for chicken, we ate 'em. I had to eat to stay alive.
So is that because people didn't have adequate space, or they didn't have refrigerators like we have now, or what?
Well, there was,
I mean, I just don't know what a food freeze is. I've never heard
well, a
of it.
food freeze had several lockers in it. They were frozen, they kept things in those lockers. And you could rent it, like I said, $50 a year, which was a great deal back then because the chickens, they went a long ways, and we had them all winter long because of that freezer. And that freezer was there for several years. And
That was there when we got married.
yeah, oh, I believe it was.
It
yeah.
was.
But my father, he worked really hard. He was always down in his garden, and and we spent time there too because we had to. But my father just would get up in the morning. Before he'd go to work, he'd be down there hoeing in that garden, and like I say, it was a big garden. And my mother she would get down and watch for woodchucks. And I'm telling you, she would get them. She would wait, and when they come out, she'd hit them with a hoe or whatever she had in her hand. But anyhow, that was kind of how we lived back then when I was real young.
So you're talking 30s and maybe early 40s?
30s, yeah, and in the 30s anyhow is what I can remember, because I remember the hurricane of 38. That was really something. I was probably 4 years old, because I was born in 1934. So I was probably around 4 years old, so I had recollections of the hurricane. And my father actually went out to help during this, and my mother, I remember, ran out to the barn. We had this big, enormous barn, and she ran out there to get some panes of glass because windows were breaking. And and I was watching out the bathroom window as she ran out, and just as she had come out, the barn came down, and it was a big barn. And as a matter of fact, after the storm, people would go up, come up onto the yard to look at it, because it was quite a sight. Well, I remember we were watching one day, and this guy drove up in a pickup truck, and all of a sudden he got out of the pickup, he ran up, because he could run up onto the side of the hill, the bank, because the roof was down that low. He jumped up onto the roof, ran up, and he took this enormous weather vane.
Oh,
Nice weather vane. He took it down, he come down, he threw it in his truck and took off. And everybody just stood there. But I never forgot that. Yeah. And
so it destroyed the barn.
well, it didn't completely destroy it. It brought it down, so my father was able to rebuild it, not to the original size, because it was I guess it was 3 stories at one time, but he had wound up doing a 2-story one. And but it was a good sized barn where we kept the animals and whatever.
Yeah.
And then down back was the chicken coops. There was some pretty good sized chicken coops where he kept all his chickens. So we had, we had a tough time when we were kids. We, like I say, with my father, he was so thankful when he got that job at Bay State, and he was able then to kind of, support us better. But of course, that's when your real problems started, because I lost a sister from appendicitis.
Wow.
And then later, when we finally got got on our feet, or he did, I should say, I had a brother that got sick. His name was Peter, and he came down with leukemia. He was only 18 years old, and so that was kind of devastating a devastating time for us. And one of the things that I remember, people, they started to really become good to us, because when we were first lived in Woodville, it was kind of tough because we were different.
Yeah,
we were
being immigrants.
Oh yeah,
He's a
we were
first
immigrants.
generation immigrant. Yeah.
And so we were. absolutely different than the regular people. But when Peter gets sick, that kind of, they started changing and getting a little better to us, treating us. But I remember Mrs. Powell, who lived right behind us, the Powell estate, she sent over a kind of a swinging settee or something that Peter could put out in the yard, and he could just lay out
To
there.
relax, yeah.
And the person that delivered it, it was strange because we had this guy. His name was Oracini. That
I've
lived
heard
in
of
town. You heard of him?
Yeah, oh yeah, I've
Well,
heard of him.
we were all terrified of him. I mean, this guy was, and I guess he was a real good guy, but we as kids were always afraid of him. But he delivered that settee to my mother and father for Peter. And like I say, they had the place right behind us. And right behind us was a big hill, Linda. And I mean, it was such a field that you could actually land a small plane on it. Well, what happened was I worked for several farms when I was a kid. There was Herman Lauder had a farm. He rented that, leased it to a guy by the name of Orrin Cattell. He was from Rhode Island. And so I worked for Herman and I worked for Orrin. And we used to come up here and he'd plant that big field with corn, right? And we'd go up there and that was a project. We'd be cutting the corn, and you'd get onto the field cutting the corn. But
So this is when you were a young man?
I was a teenager.
Okay.
I was a teenager,
Yeah.
because, we did anything we could to
Make a
earn
buck,
money to
yeah.
help out, and I worked on that particular farm, and I actually worked at the cemetery, and I remember I'd have to dig graves, and you have a machine, and I remember I'd start digging the grave, and then in the morning before I went to school, I'd go up there. If I had a funeral that day, I'd go over and I'd finish it off, and then I knew that at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon there was going to be a funeral. I'd have to be there, and then the undertaker would, make sure that everything was done.
Wow.
And he couldn't leave until I had that covered over. And so sometimes...
So that'd be the Evergreen Cemetery?
Yeah,
Is that-
Evergreen Cemetery, yeah. As a matter of fact, I helped clear that last section of it. I cut the brush, and I did various things there. I cut the grass, and it's something to make a little money, because, like I say, we were always looking for ways to earn a little extra money.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm going to go back a little here, and I'm going to look at this because we mentioned the war. The war broke out, and I recall at the time, and being a little kid, they mentioned Hitler and things of that nature. And I remember there's a lot of fear, because we didn't really understand it. I didn't, because I was young, but I remember they started, to save scrap metal and things of that nature. And what they would do, excuse me, they would put a big fence someplace in town, okay, usually right up in the center of Woodville. And everybody threw aluminum, whatever you had, in that fence. And that was a way you contributed to the war effort. And they collected a lot of metal, tires, whatever, to help the war effort. I don't think kids even realized that went on in those days, but it was very, very important for the war effort.
But you do remember doing that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another thing I remember was and I mentioned this to you before, that 4th of July was a very exciting time for me as a kid. I loved 4th of July. And we would build a bonfire. And how we did it was we would go around, fortunately we had like Herman Lauder and these people, they had trucks, and they would actually, I was too young to drive a truck, but I would go along to help. And we would pick up railroad ties at the, I don't know how they got that information that these ties were going to be available, but there was plenty of them. And we used to bring them back. And the first bonfire that I recall working on was where the fire station is now in Woodville.
Okay.
That used to be where the bonfire was. And we would bring those ties in there, and then you'd start them up by placing them right around. I think you started out with, I don't know, 12 or 16, and you kept working up to put these railroad ties up. Well, railroad ties are pretty heavy,
Right.
and so you'd need help doing it. You couldn't do it alone. And then as we went up, what we needed to do was get a way to hoist those railroad ties up. So we'd put a telephone pole in the ground, and then we'd put a pulley up there, and then we'd hoist them up using a tractor or something to pull them up. And then when we got so high, we'd have to attach another telephone pole to it so that we can get higher. And so once we get up, and the thing would work its way up so it was narrower at the top, and then we were going to have to fill it up with all the trash that we could get. And we would go around to different places and collect trash, barrels. In those days, they had lots of wooden barrels. Like Bay State Abrasives in Westboro had a lot of wooden barrels. We would bring them over, and all the trash we could collect, we would hoist up there and fill that up. So then come 3rd of July night, we look forward to that bonfire
Wow.
going up.
Wow.
And
So they're really, really huge. I've seen some pictures. I don't know what year they were. Probably maybe even before your time. But they were like stories high.
they were,
You know?
I don't recall the exact, I would say it would be 40, 50 feet, maybe even 60 feet high. I don't recall that, but I remember it went up pretty high. And when it burnt for a long time. And even back then, I said we really enjoyed 4th of July, but back then, they could sell fireworks, which was a big thing for the kids, And I recall, because we didn't have a lot of money, but we had enough to buy a few, and we would shoot rockets up over that little lake in Woodville and things like that. But we really enjoyed 4th of July. And the firemen would set up a place by the Woodville Post Office. There's a garage up there that had 2 or 3 doors. They'd open them up, and they would give out ice cream and soda and hot dogs to the kids on 4th of July. It was really.
So while is this because I don't know about these things? So the bonfire is going on. So just everybody's just congregating and hanging around, watching the fire.
Oh, sure. They would show up. And people would show up to see it, and they'd stand there for a long time, and it'd still be smoking the next day. I mean, it was a big. And how much of it continued to burn, I don't remember, but it was still smoldering.
Yeah.
But yeah, people would come around and just to watch that. But there was activity up there. Like I say, they were giving things out to the kids, soda and ice cream and that. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And of course, the trouble was the kids were throwing firecrackers and everything, which could be dangerous. But that was the way it was back then. And again, I say it was an exciting time for us as kids. The war really bothered me, because I recall listening to the news, and I would hear people like Gabriel Heater saying, yes, this sad news tonight. And, he'd go on to tell about some of the things going on. Being a kid, I didn't realize how close we were to losing that war, but you were still afraid, I heard a lot about Hitler, and I heard about the Japanese. And I recall, when I was a kid, the convoys would come through with the soldiers, and they'd go up into the woods off Wood Street. And we would walk up in there, or take our bicycles and go up to see the soldiers, right? And some of the girls and some of the people would bring cookies and whatever they could put together and bring it up for the soldiers. But after that, I used to recall and say, gee, I wonder how many of those kids, because they looked older than me, they were older, and I would think, gee, I wonder how many of those kids never come back from Europe or wherever it was that they were
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Because that was the early stages where these convoys would come through. So they were bivouacking, they were training to go
Okay.
overseas.
Okay.
And we saw a lot of that. I recall, in this, Linda, I'm going to tell you, how much of this is, I wish I could find out more about it. I did look up in the internet to try to get information on this, but I recall being outside, we were playing out there, and seeing two planes up there. They were dogfighting, and they hit each other. And they came away from each other, and one of the pilots jumped out of the plane came back down and hit each other again. And, because we didn't know, where it was going, but we had an idea where it was, and we headed to see if we could find it. And they actually landed on Cedar Swamp by the tracks down there, and one of the pilots got killed.
Wow.
And the other one parachuted into Cedar
Wow.
Swamp. Now, I could never really we tried to get down there, but they stopped us from going, from going to the scene. But
So it was military exercise?
yeah, it was
Gone
dogfighting.
wrong.
A lot
Yeah.
of this went on.
Wow.
People, I don't know if they realize it, and a lot of it
I didn't
went
know
on.
that, yeah.
There's a lot of planes had accidents
Yeah.
back then. They were training missions.
Yeah.
And I think there was a guy, I think I read at some point, was some guy made it a point to go around and look for these aircraft that went down. And what happened to this, I don't know. All I know is I think it knocked the train over when it come down. And of course, the other plane wound up in the swamp someplace. But I wish I could get more information on that.
Try to figure it out. We'll have to do some research. Huh?
Well, like I looked I haven't been able to find anything, but I'm sure there's information on it someplace,
Right. Right.
Well, anyhow, that was a part of, the story during the war. And like I say, it was a scary time. And then when the war was over, of course, we had kids, we got together and we had made a little parade, with pots and pans and whatever, celebrating the end of the war. Let's see if I can recall. The hurricane itself, 38 hurricane, was it did a lot of damage. It actually, when you come through Woodville and there's a little lake on the side there, that whole road was washed out. And, they had to come in with machines and rebuild it.
So Wood Street got washed out?
Yeah,
Yeah?
oh yeah, that section there. There's a big pipe that goes under Wood Street where the water goes through, but that was all washed out during that hurricane. One of the other things I recall was Lake Whitehall. Was really a beautiful place when I was a kid. You weren't supposed to go on there because it was owned by the MDC. It was the waterworks for Boston, and they had like 2 or 3 guys that would work there all the time, and they cut the grass, trim the bushes and everything. Made the place look beautiful all the time. It was really a nice place, and we used to sneak in there to go swimming or whatever, or fishing, but you weren't supposed to. And we were always on the lookout for these guys that worked there, because they'd chase you out. But anyhow, I recall when the state took it over, and the state, as soon as the state took it over, it started going to pot, because they didn't take care of it like it should have been.
Do you recall about when that was?
It had to be in the, I'd say around 48, around there. I can't be sure, but it was around there. And then they opened it up for fishing, and it was wonderful. We'd go out there, and you could fill a pail in no time with the fish, But then after a while, of course, it got overloaded with boats. And it's still a nice lake.
It is,
You know,
yeah,
it's still a
yeah.
beautiful lake. But back then, like I say, they used to really take good care of it. I remember we used to go out and I don't know if you're aware of it, but there used to be a Boy Scout camp in Hopkinton, in Woodville,
Okay.
on Lake Whitehall. It was the Cardinal Cushing Boy Scout camp. And it was right off the point where we used to go out and swim off this point, and it was a place that we called Perch Rock. I think it was Perch Rock, yeah. But the Boy Scout camp was built there. Now, we didn't have much contact with them. Not that, I mean, we tried to avoid it.
The Boy Scout camp?
Oh,
You
yeah.
weren't a Boy Scout?
Well, this was for the people and kids in Boston.
Oh, okay, I get you.
And they would come out and they would spend part of the summer out here. Well, what would happen was, because we were kids, and we'd be out in a boat and we'd be going by, and they'd stand out by the shore by their camp and they'd throw rocks at us. So, like I say, we tried to avoid contact, and then what we'd try to do is retaliate. And when they would walk down on the edge of the lake to go to that store in Woodville, there were two stores, and
I've heard those stories, yeah.
and we would wait for them, and then we'd throw rocks at them as they're walking by. But it never amounted to any real problems. But you know, it was. I don't know if you knew about that Boy
No, I
Scout
didn't
thing.
know,
Yeah.
I didn't know.
And I guess it was there for quite some time. And speaking of those stores, did you hear of Wheeler's store? Did you know?
Tell us about Wheelers.
Well, Wheeler came into town. I think he was from Ashland, but he came into town and he started. He started that store. The building was there.
And this is Woodville, again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's right across from the post office.
Yeah.
Wheeler's store.
Yeah.
It's right on Winter Street. But it was a big thing because when he came in, although he wasn't really popular with the kids, his wife and he had a couple of kids, you know, they were okay. But he was one of the first people that got a television set. And what he did was he put the television set in the back room, and we would go in and we'd watch television. Well, this was good because it gave us a chance to watch TV, and we would buy soda or something like that, which was good for his business. But that went on for some time. And I remember some of the early television shows that we saw with some of these serials that they used to have. And but that was our introduction to television then. And that happened to be around, happened to be around 1948, something like that. And then there was, of course, Wallace's store. They had a grocery store where the post office is, and they were also the postmaster. And
What kind of things did they sell? What kind of, just a little grocery store?
They would sell all kinds of canned goods, cookies, cold cuts, all things like that. And it actually was a gathering place for people. I mean, every evening we would go up to get the mail. Now we had boxes, mail boxes up there. You didn't have mail boxes at your house, so you'd rent a box at the post office. But then in the evening, we'd all meet there, congregate. You know, that's where you get to talk to people and see, you know, see people. And you did this practically every night. You look forward to going there. And that went on for quite some time, and then I'm not really sure what happened. I remember the owner, his name was Joe Wells, and he died. Do you know Betsy Wells? Betsy Stevens? She was his daughter, and she became the postmistress there.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
And so we kind of hung around that place too. But again, you know, it's a small village.
So you probably stayed in Woodville and didn't necessarily spend that much time in downtown Hopkinton.
No, well, we didn't go into the center of Hopkinton that much. We used to play baseball. When I was a kid, I organized baseball teams. We didn't have regular
Right,
baseball
right.
and football and whatever. So we would organize our own teams. Like I organized a baseball team, football team, and even a basketball team. And then we would go up to Hopkinton to play against some of the teams that they organized up there. My contact with Hopkinton was basically with the school, because we went to center school, and then from then on we went up to the to the high school, which was
It's currently the middle school.
well, not that one.
Okay.
It's, what it is that building that is across from Paul Phipps's. It's right in front of the Little League.
Yep.
That was the high school, and they called it Stedgy Prep.
Right.
Now
right.
they have we'd have.
You tied the original high school, the brick building.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Okay.
And anybody that went to that building would be invited to the Stedgy Prep reunion, which we used to have like every 5 years.
So there was just the center school, and then you went to that building.
That was the high school
Right.
and the junior high.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then afterwards, I graduated from there, and then they built the other
Like in
schools.
the 50s,
Yeah,
sometime in the 50s.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was getting the dates wrong. Yeah.
Uh,
And do you want to say why it was called Stedgy Prep?
Well, the story is that these guys, young guys that went to the high school, went to some place, some other town, and they met some girls. And the girls asked them where they were from, and the story is that they told them, well, we go to Stedgy Prep. They made this up. So it come back, and it became, that's what everybody referred to it after that. And I don't know who those guys were, but that's the story we got.
To
Yeah.
impress the girls, made it sound
Yeah,
like a
right, it did,
private
yeah.
school.
But anyhow, that was part of that. Let's see what else I can. There were several farms when I was a kid in town. There was, like I said, there was Larder, and Cattell leased it. There was also the Andrews Farm. I don't know if you ever heard of that one. He used to sell milk, and that was
Dairy then, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
And there was Woods lived on Fruit Street. They had a farm. Cornell's further down on North Street. They had a farm.
Do you know what kind of farm? I mean, just in general, what kind of farms?
Well, most of them were dairy farms. Yeah. And they did, I believe Cornell's, they grew vegetables and stuff. But I believe they also had, dairy cows. I'm not sure. I recall going there to those farms because my father would get down and visit them. But most of my time on the farm was spent right there in the center of Woodville at Larder's or in Cattell's farm. That's where we basically did most of it. Back then, we would drive a tractor on the road. Didn't have a license, but he'd tell me, go down to this field and mow the grass. Well, you did it because you were working for him, but I wasn't supposed to be out on the road, But anyhow, it was quite an experience. It was hard work, though. Working on a farm, haying in the summertime was very hard work. But like you say, you did what you had to do. I'd just like to throw this in about, when I was a kid, of course, come from a family, we didn't have a lot, but we used to try to do whatever we could to make our own entertainment. And one of the things that I used to do was, back then, everybody had dumps. Mm-hmm. There were no trash pickup.
Right.
Excuse me. And we would go around the dumps to see what we could find for old trucks, old whatever, so we could bring them back and, try to fix them up.
Looking for parts, yeah.
Yeah. And we did that also with bicycles, because I never had a brand new bike.
Yeah.
But we would find parts, and I would build bicycles. And doing that, I got so I was pretty good at putting things together, you know. But that was part of living then, you know. And
Sounds good to me. It sounds like I don't know, the way people would like to live now, you know? Just
well,
getting
you know,
back
you
to-
see that American Pickers?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
we were the original pickers because we had to go around picking to make.
You were
put our tools.
recycling and reusing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. But there was a lot of people that had dumps in their backyard, and of course, that stopped, and you couldn't do that anymore. We like I say, it was, you know, it was tough, but it wasn't tough. I mean,
Did you think of yourself as poor or not?
well, we knew we didn't have some of the things that other kids had. One of the things I recall was I remember one kid that I knew. Every year they'd get new bicycles, new skates, new skis,
Yeah.
and they'd always invite me up to see what they got. Well, of course that hurt, because we didn't.
Oh,
know,
you were
we
making
didn't-
your bike from the dump.
Yeah, we
pieces,
were.
Yeah.
But that's, and you know what? It's not like we didn't suffer because we always were able to.
Yeah, you weren't
get along.
hungry. You never
Yeah.
were hungry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we were always finding things to do. You know, I remember as a kid, I made this little gambling joint, and I made the games with marbles and whatever, and the kids used to come over and would play these games, and it was our little Las Vegas, I guess. But you know, it wasn't any big deal, but it was just something that you did, you know.
And you ran that. That was your idea?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, I built it. Well, I was kind of a leader when I was a kid, you know, and I'd put together.
Well, I got that
the
impression
clubs.
because you organized the sports team, so that's a big deal.
When I did that, yeah, we would, and you know what we used to do? My mother was great at crocheting and things of that nature. And in order to get money for the baseball bats and balls, and she would make us these bedspreads and things like that. Then we would go around, we would sell chances. Well, we weren't supposed to do that, I guess. Nobody told us we couldn't, but we did it. And we used to sell chances. Now, we would get enough money to be able to buy baseballs and things like that so that we were able to,
Wow.
yeah. But
good story.
that was our organized sports. And we did that, like I say, with baseball, football, not so much basketball, but baseball and football we did. And I used to get games against, even played against Westboro, Southboro, things like, we used to walk to these places, you know,
Yeah.
and then walk back after you
Yeah.
after you played.
Yeah.
But again, you didn't think you didn't think there was tough
You're just
times.
doing what you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we, you know, looking back on it, because you enjoyed it, you know. And then that was, you know, then once I get older, I was able to, you know, go on to into school sports, you know. Let's see, I'm going to try to find a couple of things here that oh yeah, you know, I don't know if people recall all the things that used to be delivered to the homes. Back then, they used to deliver ice. We didn't have refrigerators. We had an ice box. And you'd put this sign up on your window how much ice you wanted. Like it was 25 cents worth or 40 cents worth. And that's what they did. And then the guy would come in and he'd deliver the ice to you.
For your ice box.
For your ice
right?
box.
Yeah, my mother always called the refrigerator the ice box.
Ice
And
box.
you were
That's
like,
why-
What do you call that?
That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what it was. And they used to also, like on Fridays, the fish man would come around and sell fish. They used to actually deliver bakery products, of course milk, we all knew about the milk.
Did you know these people who were delivering the stuff? You know, you get to know who the fish man is and the...
Well, yeah, a couple of them I did, but that would change too,
Yeah.
because it
You
wound
get a
up
new
being
one.
somebody else,
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff was delivered to the doors.
So you were just in Woodville. You have stuff delivered. You got a couple little stores. It's not like did you go to Framingham? Did you ever have to?
We would go to Framingham. As a matter of fact, sometimes we'd go to Framingham to go to St. George's Theater and to see movies. Of course, not that often, and then we'd go to Westboro at the Strand Theater. Now, it only cost 12 cents to go see a movie. And I remember, I actually was in that movie when the war broke out. Japan attacked
With Pearl Harbor?
Pearl
Yeah.
Harbor. And I recall they stopped the movie and they announced it.
Do you remember what the movie was?
No, I
Yeah,
don't, because,
yeah.
like I say, I don't recall, but I remember being in there when that was
Wow.
announced.
Wow.
But we did go to Framingham, we did go to Westboro. Most of our lives as kids were right in Woodville. And as I got older, then of course now you start migrating and you get a lot of friends from school.
Mm-hmm.
And we hung around a lot down to the lake area at Mac's Cabin. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Lake Maspinock? Is that
Lake
what?
Maspinock.
Yeah. Mac's Cabin?
Mac's Cabin, it was called. It was a great place for teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of fun there, and that's where you
Big
socialize.
cabin, and it was okay to go there? Or you going?
Oh, it was. They sold stuff there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
they had
okay.
a jukebox and yeah, you could go in and buy sandwiches.
Right
whatever.
across from where the parking lot is
Yeah.
now? Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's,
And they used
I
to
know that.
actually have movies there, like on Friday, Saturday nights, show the movies outside, and yeah. So as kids, we
That's great.
oh yeah, we
Yeah.
hung around. You always found something to do, right? And it was a good time. Like I say, some of the memories were kind of tough, particularly when my brother Peter was sick, because that was always on your mind, that
Yeah.
we knew he wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. A lot of different ways to you learned things because you had to learn things, And again, I would have liked to this day, because I remember, and I'll say to her, gee, I wish I had a new truck, because when I was a kid, I always wanted a new truck, and like I said, we go to these dumps and find these old toys, and then put together what we could to have toys. Again, it sounds terrible, but
No, it doesn't
really
sound
isn't.
doesn't sound terrible to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Doesn't sound terrible at all.
I was trying to.
You were making the best.
Oh, you
of what
had to,
had, and,
yeah.
and
Yeah, it was.
that's being independent. Somebody buys you a toy. They buy you a toy. You make your own out of. That's
Well, this is probably why
Admirable.
Even today, Linda, I do a lot of my own stuff.
And you garden. You're definitely a gardener. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I love
I know
to
about your garden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that all came because of. I remember when
That's being self-sufficient. All of that,
Yeah, like right now, we burn wood. We've got I put in a wood.
I think I
Stove
saw there was a lot of wood outside. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's all
Yes, I
part of
better
it.
Yeah.
check that, I never thought
Yeah.
that far.
Yeah.
But it certainly helps with the fuel costs,
Yeah.
And because work never bothered me. I always liked to be busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, now that I'm older, I can't do what I used to, and it kind of hurts a little
Oh,
bit.
frustrating. Yeah. Yeah.
But all in all, it was pretty good.
No, it sounds like a good childhood to me.
Well, I hope it's it's interesting to you. I wish I could add more for the history of Hopkinton, but
This is a history. This is social history, is what you're telling us.
Well,
history
one
of
of
what the people were doing.
Well, one of the things too was, I don't know if anybody ever told you about Haywood's Dairy.
No, I don't know about Hayward's
didn't
Dairy.
okay.
Yeah.
This
I
fellow
know the
by
name Hayward, though. Definitely.
Wendell Haywood married this gal, Her name was Ann Berry, and they built Haywood's Dairy right on Wood Street. It's right across from the boat landing. And for years, it was a great, you go out, buy fried clams and all that stuff.
And ice cream? Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. And it did a heck of a business for a long time. And then I guess he decided to sell it, and he moved to Florida. But it was.
I guess I heard in other interviews, I heard kids coming from out of town to swim in the lake or whatever, do whatever at the lake, and then get an ice cream across the street. So that must be.
Well, that must have been
Yeah,
where it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the you mentioned something that just, again, things come to mind.
Right.
I remember as a kid, we had these guys, and this was just before the Korean War. These guys came from Boston, and they were camping all the way out. They were going to go across the state before they went into the military, and they stopped in Woodville, and they camped around Lake Whitehall, and we got to know them. And they only stayed here for about a week or so, but we got to know them. And and this is what they were doing before they went into the service, was they wanted to go across and camp out all the way across.
Is this for training
the state.
purposes?
No.
Oh no, they just want a last shot before the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They were kids.
Yeah.
They were only probably 17, 18 years old.
Yeah, trying to have a good time before
Yeah.
they had to go off to war.
Because they were going to be drafted.
Yeah.
Because in those days, that's what they would do. They
Yeah.
would, because one of the things that, always bothered me was I knew that I would be drafted, but I enlisted instead.
For Korea.
Well, it was during the Korean
Yeah.
War. I didn't go to Korea. My brother did, but instead they sent me to Iceland.
Did they?
for a year, right? And so I spent part of my service up there. Let's see what else I can offer you here. That my mother was quite a lady. She was a hard worker. Like I said, she used to can. You would not believe the stuff that she would can. And it was all for survival.
Right, yep.
And next door to us was this family. His name was Mr. Trombley, and he was the vice president of Boston Albany Railroad. Wealthy people.
So this is Exchange Street again.
Right.
Yeah.
And lived next door to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
She was kind of a highfalutin person, because they had money. But she was very good to my mother. They were so good to my mother. And they had this apple tree out back. It was a big apple tree. Grapevines on it. And grapes on it, Linda, you would not believe the grapes on it. And they told us that we could go out and we could pick the grapes. We'd be climbing up there. We'd pick bushels of grapes.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
my mother would make the grape jelly and, the juice and all this stuff out of that.
Did she speak English? Did they have problem? Did they speak English? Well.
My mother could actually speak better than my father.
Yeah.
Although he never said that to my father
Yeah.
because he'd get mad.
Yeah.
But yeah, they both spoke English. They both wanted to be. They could not wait to be. They wanted to be American citizens. So they both became American citizens.
And do you speak Spanish? Did they have you speaking? Did you?
Unfortunately, when I was a kid, Linda, they would speak to us in Spanish all the time. And I could understand it just like, English.
Yeah.
But as time went by, and once, particularly when we went to school, we had to learn English. We had to speak English.
Yeah.
So I lost it all.
Yeah.
And I still say to this day that if I wound up going to South America in 6 months, I
come
would
back,
probably,
yeah,
because
come
it
right,
does come back,
Yeah. Yeah.
But they used to speak to us in Spanish all the time.
Yeah.
And we'd answer
Yeah.
in English.
Yeah.
And maybe we did a little bit of Spanish.
But was that unusual in Hopkinton? Were there other Spanish-speaking people, or
No,
everybody's Irish Catholic and
There was
Protestant?
Irish Catholic, but
Yeah.
there weren't many Spanish.
Right.
There was,
Right.
There was only, there was a couple of Italians, some Italians, and my father and mother got friendly with some of the Italians, particularly in Framingham, because there was a lot of Italians there. But yeah, no, most of your people were Irish,
Yeah,
Irish and English in,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Hopkinton. But anyhow, that was, I don't know if I've given you
no, you've
much
given us a lot.
information.
This is a good place to stop. It is.
Okay.
You've given. I thought you had some terrific information.
Well,
it's
I-
different than what I've heard from other people.
Oh, is it really?
Well, I like this because the more I hear, the more rounded the picture gets of what the town was like. This is a lot about Woodville. So we can conclude this interview of January 23rd, 2014 with Joe Martin here on Spring Street. No, I thought it was great. I learned a lot about the town and about you.
Well, it's been
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Not yet. Well, after we stop talking, you're going to remember all kinds of things
Yeah,
that
well,
you wish you said, but that's just
that-
how it is.
That would happen.
All right, so we're going to shut this off.
Okay, Linda.
All right.